So the first issue is that it violates the interface segregation principle. This principle says that no client should be forced to use or to have access to the methods it doesn't use. So in order to demonstrate it, I need to show you who is the client. In this example, it's the create user controller. Normally, I would not include, inject the repository in the middle of the controller, but I would use like a domain layer in between. But for now, for the simplicity, please consider that a case. So in here we can see that I'm injecting user repository, but actually on the line 22, I'm also calling an add method. But how about all the other methods that I have in this interface? They are being injected too, and I don't want to use them, and I don't intend to use them. And this is the case for 90% of the situations. So this is why you should avoid big interfaces like this. Think about it like splitting those interfaces into smaller possible examples. The reason why would you do it is also not only just to optimize it, but think about like high cohesive code. Cohesion is when you like sort of limit access to your modules, and with having an ISP in mind, you can increase the cohesivity of your system. Another thing is also think about like afferent coupling and efferent coupling. So this class will be used in many controllers. So you will, if I create more single responsibility controllers, where I'm gonna have delete user, all the CRUD application, and then I will also need to inject that. So now a lot of controllers are depending on a single class. That's not really good because it's a high efferent coupling. Well, you can argue with me that, yeah, but I would just create like this resource controller that I have all my CRUD actions in there. And you're probably right. If you make a CRUD application, you will be fine doing that. But the stuff I'm teaching you here is high level stuff. I mean, in CRUD applications, you barely have any domain. You don't have a lot of logics that needs to be taken care of, and you don't have hexagonal architecture, and you don't have a CQ arrays. So yeah, you will be fine. But bear in mind that this is only the start, and most of the cases, when you develop it further, you realize that you don't create just a CRUDs actually, because then you're gonna have like this spread monolith anti-pattern in where you just have those tons of different microservices that don't do anything but just like add the wrapper around the database. You probably want to rethink your strategy. Maybe you want to go with serverless or something like this, because that's much easier to just create a CRUD application. Most of the cases you start putting some business rules and you start actually treating your application a little bit differently than just a CRUD. And in that situation, like, you will not go and manage it through the resource controllers. So when I look at interface like this, I think it violates the single responsibility principle. I mean, of course you can argue that, well, it's not really, because it's sole responsibility, or the reason to exist is to manage a user data layer kind of access, where we can create users, remove users, add users and stuff. And probably it's true, but usually it leads to a lot of tangled stuff, and it also leads to problematic dependencies eventually. So I don't really like it. I don't really buy that argument. I think what we should be doing is to modify more fine-grained classes. I mean, I believe there is in PHP world, there is this approach of fear of making classes. And I don't think you should really. I mean, we are in PHP 7, soon even higher numbers, and it's not PHP 4 anymore. We have auto loading and everything is going pretty good. So don't be afraid of making classes. It's pretty cool. I mean, just make single responsibility classes that have deal with only one as narrow as possible scope. It should have really one reason to exist. So I think it's doing way too much.